Moin Genossen and welcome back to Transport Fever 2, and at the beginning of this episode we are finally going to pay off our loan for real this time. So, without further ado, let's get right into the time lapse. In the last episode I said we're going to start with double tracking our line, and guess what I'm doing right now? With our loan paid off and cash in the bank, it shouldn't be too hard to do it, right? Well, the problem is that the station platform of the iron ore mine is right in the way of our tracks. Now, it isn't too hard to fix this, but we're on the top of a mountain, so it's quite difficult to get the tracks in properly. Because the original line was on an incline to get to the peak of a mountain, I thought it was best to separate the second track by going downhill and joining up after the peak of the mountain. As you could see, the rest of the track was smooth sailing, but I actually ran out of money a bit more than halfway down the track. So I set the speed to 21 times and waited for the train to arrive and make some money. Which it did, so I continued on double tracking. Luckily the platform of the farm station was out of the way, so I could just go right by it. So after that I just finished double tracking, and then I started placing signals at the end of each section. However, after I placed the signals, the line got interrupted. At first I thought I placed the signal wrong, but then I looked back over to the bypass of the iron ore station. This was the moment when I realized that I got the track bypassing the iron ore station completely wrong. I connected the left track on the right side and the right track on the left side, and therefore I had to redo my track work. This proved to be challenging since the track was on the top of a mountain and therefore the other track was on an incline, and so it was very hard to get the tracks to cross each other without creating level crossing. Which I didn't want, since it could have created a bottleneck which would have reduced the efficiency of the lines running through the spot. So I decided to lower the bypass track and increase the height of the original track so the two could cross each other. At first I tried to use a bridge, but in the end I had to go with a tunnel, since I was unable to fit in a bridge. I think, however, that it turned out quite nice with the tunnel going downhill, because I always think that tunnels look better than bridges anyways. So I placed the signals back in, and then afterwards I decided to place in the last of the signals. Because I didn't want to place every signal by hand, I used a mod that automatically places the signals in a predetermined spacing. So in the end I borrowed some more money and then bought a second train. I then looked at the production numbers of the industries I had connected, which made me realize that the livestock farm was quite the bottleneck, with a production of only 40 and a 1-to-1 ratio. So in the future I'd probably have to connect a second livestock farm or food factory. I scouted around the map for a bit and I realized that the town of Hema required food and that I was delivering the grain to the livestock farm, which I could deliver to a meat factory, which was at the end of the line already. The good thing about this road is that I only need the same type of wagon, and that the ratio of the meat factory for livestock is also 1-to-1, so I could very easily just operate the road in both directions without any wasted traveling time. So then I went on to connect it. I started by placing a station on the meat factory, in front of which I created a nice little bridge which would connect it to the island of the main line. While I activated the contour lines, I had no problem fitting it in with the terrain. What made me some problems though was the switch. I didn't want the rails to clip through each other, so I had to fiddle around with it a little bit. I double tracked the rail since in the end I probably will have more trains going along this road, but for the time being it will just be one. I had very little money left, so I didn't want to double track the bridge, and as well as that, the switches look kinda weird on bridges, so I didn't really want to do that. Moving on, I added another track and platform to the livestock station, since I didn't want trains that were loading cattle to block the main line. The problem was that I ran out of money, so I had to make a little jump here, waiting for a little bit more cash, so that I could finish the switches in front of the station. I definitely didn't want to pay for trucks moving along this short of a route, so I decided to add another station that would connect to the food farm. Problem was that the food farm was on the other side of the bridge and it didn't want to connect from that distance, so I had to create a new bridge that was able to connect the two. I quickly fixed up the line and then I had to create a little small track that would connect the two stations. I decided to raise the bridge up a bit because if I ever were to run chips, it would need to be a certain height so they could fit under it. I then created a line and I realized I had connected up the station wrongly, in both directions. This switch was also a bit annoying. After I fixed up all of the signals, I named the line Cattle to Meat Train Korbach because the meat factory was in Korbach. I gave it a meaty reddy color and I also decided to rename the Iron Train Korbach into Iron and Grain Train Korbach. I also gave the boxcars the same red color because I like the consistency and to see which trains transporting which good on the line. I ran out of money while buying a train and even had to max out my loan again, but in the end I bought a train. This was the point when I realized that the depot was facing the wrong direction, so I first of all had to assign the train to the iron and grain line before I could redirect it to the cattle to meat line. I didn't want the train to do two pointless trips without any goods, so I decided to turn it around and create a switch. The problem was that it was already in the red at that point, so I didn't have the money to afford it and couldn't take out a loan, so I had to sell off a bit of the train. Luckily I was able to buy the rest back in due time. Since the livestock farm ran out of grain, I decided to turn the train around since it was almost full anyways. While the train was on its way, I decided to connect the depot to the bypass route because I didn't want any more trains to have to first of all be assigned to the iron line. Afterwards, I created a small truck route that would distribute the food in the town of Hemia. I added another truck on it because the rate was 33 and the town required 38. Afterwards the train finally pulled into the meat factory. I turned the train around because I wanted it to transport a full load of meat in the next run. Lastly in this episode I wanted to create some bypass tracks around the station so that the trains that would run along the same track wouldn't have to wait for the trains on the iron and grain line. My problem on the first station was that, as I said, the bridges couldn't make good switches, so I had to do some terraforming instead. Overall it was a bit expensive, but I think it turned out well in the end. I also wanted to add waypoints at first, but the trains automatically avoid the station, so I hadn't had to do that in the first place. And that was it for this episode. I think we've been quite successful in our endeavors, but sadly I didn't record a nice panning shot in the end, because I recorded more than I needed to and only have a panning shot of the completed build of the next episode. However, until then, have a great day, enjoy yourself. This is me signing off. Goodbye.